This is the first of 3 videos looking at Reaktor's Razor instrument. And Razor is an additive synthesizer, and if you haven't watched the videos yet covering Laser-Bass, I suggest you go back and watch those first, because in those I explain the basic principles of additive synthesis, which are very useful for understanding the way this instrument works. In this video, what I'm going to do is give an overview of the panel, explain the signal flow and the various different modules, and have a look at how we assign modulation. And then in the following videos we'll start to design some sounds in a little bit more depth. So the sound originates from over here inside our oscillator section, and when we first load up a default sound, which we'll find here from bank 9 and initialize patch, what we have is something which sounds very much like a sawtooth wave with a low pass filter. And if I just trigger a note from my keyboard, we have something which sounds as we would expect. I also have a central section here which is designed to show me various different aspects of the sound that's being triggered at any one time. So here with this oscillator 1 tab selected, I can see the harmonic content of the sound, and if I make the adjustment of pulse saw, as we would expect, we see the proportions of odd and even harmonics changing. If I have this auto tab selected, this is quite useful because it means that whenever I adjust any parameter of the instrument, the display will change to show me what this parameter is actually doing to the sound. So rather than select filter directly, you'll see that if I have oscillator 1 selected and I just adjust the cutoff here, the display is updated to show me what this filter parameter is doing to the partials in the sound. And this display is really useful and helps to develop an understanding of what we're actually doing in terms of putting the sound together. So for instance, if I look at this low pass filter, I can see that with the cutoff almost fully open, I have this boosted area of frequencies which I can sweep up and down. And I have a boost control, which is something like the amount of resonance that I would find on a filter, and a width or Q. Although it's worth bearing in mind that this is not actually a low pass filter. So being an additive synth, what this does is it generates the impression or the sound of a low pass filter or the various other filters that we'll be looking at by manipulating the presence of sine waves or partials in the sound over time. And the same thing is true of other sections such as the pitch or dissonant effects and the time-based effects such as reverb and so on that we'll have a look at in later videos. What we also have up here, the upper left and upper right area of the instrument, are some global sections to do with voicing. So for instance, I'm just going to adjust this pitch down a couple of octaves, -24. We can change the glide time between notes. We can change the start time of oscillators. We can randomize the phase of voices to introduce a more fuzzy quality into the sound. And then in this section here, spectral clip, this is adjusting the high frequency content of the sound, and safe bass is introducing some low end which is not passed through these effects modules, and we'll cover these a little bit later on. So just sticking with a very simple sound as we have here, how would I assign modulation, for instance, so that I could adjust the low pass filter over time? You can see down here we have several modulation sources, such as these 3 envelopes and 2 LFOs, and the first of the envelopes is already hardwired to the amp, but we do have an additional 2 as well as these 2 LFOs. And you'll also see on many parameters of the synth these circles here which tell us that these are ready to receive a modulation input. So we want to assign an LFO, for instance, to the filter cutoff. I'm going to do that just by clicking in this tab, and when I do that you can see the available modulation sources appear here. So we're just going to select LFO1, and the display updates here to say LF1 to tell us that that has been assigned. Although if I trigger a key, I'm not hearing anything, and that's because I need to set the range or depth, and I'm going to do that just by pulling up or down. You can see that I can have positive or negative modulation either side of my start point. Being an LFO, this is going to go above and below the central position that we've selected. So let's just define that range. And to adjust the LFO speed and shape is very simple. And just by scrolling up and down on the waveform display, we can adjust the waveform shape, and we can also choose to synchronize the LFO speed with a project tempo just by clicking on beat. So that's our basic overview of this instrument, and what I'm going to do in the next video is start looking at the oscillators and filter options in a little bit more depth.